Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our short little study session on the time between the Old and New Testaments. Today we're going to be briefly speaking about the Persian period, which extended from 539 to 336 BC. In the very first of his reign, Cyrus, the king of Persia, had freed the Israelites from their captivity. He actually encouraged them to return to their homeland. This can be found, to just jog your memory, in Ezra chapter 1, and we'll briefly read that real quick so you understand the decree that was actually sent out. You can find this in Ezra 1. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord fulfilled the prophecy he had given through Jeremiah. He stirred the heart of Cyrus, to put this proclamation in writing and to send it throughout his kingdom. This is what King Cyrus of Persia says: "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has appointed me to build him a temple at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Any of you who are his people may go to Jerusalem and Judah to rebuild this temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, who lives in Jerusalem. And may your God be with you. Wherever this Jewish remnant is found, let their neighbors contribute toward their expenses by giving them silver and gold, supplies for the journey and livestock, as well as voluntarily offering for the temple of God in Jerusalem." So you see right here, when that decree went out, this is the starting of the Persian period. Okay, so that was Cyrus, the king of Persia. His successor, King Darius, continued Persia's pro-Israel policy, even threatening with capital punishment those who hindered the Israelites from rebuilding their temple and resettling the land. The Jews dwelt in relative peace. Now, Darius's decree can be found in Ezra chapter 6. And we'll see, where is this at? Okay, we'll actually read the memorandum. So this is just simply giving you a basic history lesson, shortened, between the Old Testament, bridging the gap between Christ's coming. So here it is, Darius approving the rebuilding. So King Darius issued orders that a search be made in the Babylonian archives, which were stored in the treasury, but it was at a fortress of Ecbatana in the province of Media that a scroll was found. This is what it said, memorandum. In the first year of King Cyrus's reign, a decree was sent out concerning the temple of God at Jerusalem. We just read that. Let the temple be rebuilt on the site where the Jews used to offer their sacrifices using the original foundations. Its height will be 90 feet, and its width will be 90 feet. Every 3 layers of specially prepared stones will be topped by a layer of timber. All expenses will be paid by the royal treasury. Furthermore, the gold and silver cups which were taken to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar from the temple of God in Jerusalem must be returned to Jerusalem and put back where they belong. Let them be taken back to the temple of God. So you can see this is what he finds in the archives from King Cyrus. And then he issues this decree. "Now therefore, Tattenai, governor of the province west of the Euphrates rivers, and Shethar-Bozenai, and your colleagues and other officials west of the Euphrates River, stay away from there. Do not disturb the construction of the temple of God. Let it be rebuilt on its original site, and do not hinder the governor of Judah and the elders of the Jews in their work. Moreover, I hereby decree that you are to help these elders of the Jews as they rebuild the temple of God. You must pay the full construction costs without delay from my taxes collected in the province west of the Euphrates River, so that the work will not be interrupted. Give the priests in Jerusalem whatever is needed in the way of young bulls, rams, and male lambs for the burnt offerings presented to the God of heaven, and without fail provide them with as much wheat, salt, wine, and olive oil as they need each day. Then they will be able to offer acceptable sacrifices to the God of heaven and pray for the welfare of the king and his sons. Those who violate this decree in any way will have a beam pulled from their house, when they will be lifted up and impaled on it, and their house will be reduced to a pile of rubble. May the God who has chosen the city of Jerusalem as a place to honor his name destroy any king or nation that violates this command and destroys this temple. I, Darius, have issued this decree. Let it be obeyed with all diligence." So you see right here, when people say, well, how is this going to happen? Because God can do all things. God can do all things. He put it in both of those kings' hearts to let the Israelites return, to rebuild that temple. So this is the beginning, all right, at the time of the Persian period. However, there were several key developments that began to reshape their practice of religion. Likely, as a result of the years in exile, the Jews began to worship in local synagogues that were spread throughout the Persian Empire. They continued this new practice in their own land, even after the temple was rebuilt. The temple does get rebuilt. Although priests served in the temple and performed the required sacrifices, worship in the synagogues centered on the study of the law. and teachers of religious law became the influential preservers and interpreters of the law. So right here, you see a beginning of Pharisaical formation, where people were no longer looking to God, right? They weren't worshiping. Some were still going to the temples, but now in the synagogues, it was centered on the study of law, legalists, right? Different interpretations of what God's saying, or man's interpretation of what they think is right. People with questions about God became more likely to turn to a teacher of the law than a priest. So we see a shift that's happened. The interesting thing is you see this today. You see an absence of faith in people to where it just is going in a different direction. Not so much, let's say, legal, but scientific. Okay? So you see where some of these things started and how long this has been going on for. When people say, well, why is this happening now? Look back to what was going on back then. During this time, the Israelites also came into religious conflict with the Samaritans, descendants of the Israelites who had been left behind during the Babylonian exile. The Samaritans had intermarried with the Babylonians, and this is why a lot of people, also the Syrians and others, this is why you see in the New Testament where there was this animosity between the Jews and the Samaritans. See? When you get a picture of why these things were going on, it starts to make sense. As a result, their worship grew syncretistic. I don't know what that word is. Incorporating elements of pagan religions with worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel. Okay? While the Jews rebuilt a temple in Jerusalem, the Samaritans built a rival temple in the north. The ensuing religious and ethnic strife between Jews and Samaritans proved to be long-lasting. Now, this was made very apparent when Jesus was here. That's why the disciples were so surprised. Not only was he speaking to a woman, he was speaking to a Samaritan woman. See, when stuff is put into context, it starts to make a lot more sense of surprise. A person reading this is like, well, what's the big deal? We're looking at it through a context of not understanding. From today, you can talk to whoever you want. Back then, and this is why Jesus, the impact, obviously, he had on everything, but he was bridging this gap, but this animosity that had formed between people, this divide, he brought people together. That's the key thing. That's why you'll always hear me saying, following Christ is not religion. It's following Christ. That's Christianity. That's what that means. It means a follower of Christ. This whole thing of divides and compartmentalization of beliefs has divided people, right? Doesn't he say a house divided against himself cannot stand? So when you take this initial period, this gap, all the different kingdoms that were leading up to the Roman kingdom and thereafter, the Persian period gives you a basic understanding of, you started to see legalism forming to where it was taking over and grabbing people away from, let's say, the preferred way of worship into man's interpretation of worship, where they were turning to a man for interpretation rather than turning to God. So we can start to see why these things had happened and how it would foreshadow the other issues that are still going on today. All right? So I'm glad you guys could join us. The next study that we'll be doing will be on the Hellenistic period, which ranged from 336 to 165 BC. So this is a good starting point, again, for those of you who haven't read the Old and New Testament, to bridge that gap so you understand when you do go back and read it,